Hello and welcome to a very short episode of the Radical Podcast, mostly because I don't have a lot of time, but also because the topic is pretty simple. Today's topic is basic income. Now, if you don't know what basic income is, why don't you open up Google right now and type in basic income. You can also go on Twitter and type in hashtag basic income. So in a nutshell, basic income is exactly what it sounds like. Giving people just enough money to cover your basic needs. Basic needs meaning food, shelter, electricity, just the basics. No luxuries, but enough that you don't have to live your life in stress and anxiety and depression and all the things that go along with just trudging through life. Now, usually on this podcast we talk about radical ideas. So how is this a radical idea? Well, the idea itself is not that radical. It's actually been talked about for quite a while, but the results would contribute to a radical shift. I am absolutely for this idea because it pains me to see human potential just go wasted. When you drive through a McDonald's or any sort of fast food joint, when you go into some retail store that doesn't even have to exist anymore because we have the internet, and you see people who are probably well-educated, probably imaginative, intelligent people, and they're hawking shoes and shirts and cosmetics at you. This is hardly a good use of human potential. This is just an absolute waste. And it's not just an absolute waste because their time is being wasted. It's a waste because their imagination, their creativity, their brilliance is being crushed under the heel of the corporate giants. And I've worked in a few of these horrible workplaces, and they're all the same. Anything operating on the corporate principle, the point of all the training you go through is to produce consistency. Now, consistency is another word in this case for conformity. In other words, every single McDonald's you walk into, you are expected to be greeted the same way. You expect to see more or less the same menu items aside from their local specialties. And it's the same in larger scale chain restaurants. It's the same in retail stores as big as Home Hardware and as small as, say, Ardene's or Claire's. They're all the same. They have unified policies that simply take a unique personality, shove it in a box, and if you try to step outside that box, you get penalized, harassed, so on. So with basic income, you don't have to do those jobs anymore. No one has to do those jobs anymore anyways. You don't need a physical box store anymore. You don't need a brick and mortar store anymore. There's internet stores. Anyone can have a store online, and it costs you cents each month. If you have actual physical storage space, maybe a little bit more where you need to store your product, but ultimately, physical stores not really needed. More or less a blight on society. We can automate. We can do better. So you start paying these people basic income. By the way, this is also a method of redistribution of wealth, if you think about it, because what we're doing in an ideal world is we're taxing heavily the grotesquely rich, and we're taking that money and we're giving it to everyday people to cover their basic needs. Now, the point of all this is, how many times have you wanted to write a book or paint or make music or do charity work or help out around your community, join the scouts as a scout guide, or teach music, teach something that you know. How many times have you wanted to do that and you thought, well, I would, but I can't, I got to get to work and I just don't have the time, and you're struggling every single day. You're working a full-time job and you are still just barely able to keep your head above water. You've probably got credit card debt. You've probably, you gotta make the payments on the car. You gotta make the insurance payments for the car. All of these things. Now, basic income doesn't wipe all of it out. It's not intended to to make you live in luxury for free. But time and time again, studies have shown that when people are not stressed about where their next meal will come from, when people are not stressed about the prospect of losing their home, their security, they behave much better toward one another. This is simply biological. An environment of scarcity produces behavior that is evolutionarily advantageous in such an environment. What that means is, if there's not enough to go around, you are going to try to take your share by force. You will use methods that you might not use otherwise to do so. So this is why scarcity produces crime, it produces violence. Anyone who engages in crime or in violence, therefore, is decreasing their empathic connection with others. In order to do something like that, you have to be less emotionally connected. Just in order to get past that barrier of self-judgment or of thought, of logic that keeps you from doing it. You have to break that down, and it has to be an act of more or less desperation. If not desperation, then certainly untempered anger, and things like scarcity, not having enough to eat, living in constant stress, keeps your cortisol levels high. Cortisol is the basis of your fight or flight reflexes. It's the basis of anxiety. It's a basis of everything that the media tries to manipulate in you, that fear in you about, say, immigrants or about drugs or any of those things. They're trying to increase your stress levels. They're trying to, because a sense of insecurity is profitable to them. Because if you feel insecure, then you're not going to quit your job. Even no matter how crappy it is, no matter how much you get abused, no matter how poorly you get paid, you're not going to quit your job if you feel insecure, because that gives you one shred of security, knowing that where your next meal is going to come from. If you're insecure, you are not going to demand as many rights for yourself, because you'll be worried about them taking away what's left. And this is a whole chain, and it's really self-evident if you really start thinking about it. So with basic income, we can eliminate a lot of that bad behavior. We can do what we should have done years ago, and that's automate most of the menial jobs, which is absolutely possible. And we therefore will have more resources to go around, because our jobs are, the crappy jobs are automated. So we don't have to pay anyone to do that. We just have to pay for maintenance on the machines. And therefore, all that money can now be reallocated. Basic income is the start of a radical shift within humanity, especially if it's implemented in the near future. It's the start of a radical shift because it opens up human potential. Back, several decades ago, I read an article just about it yesterday, but go ahead and Google Mincome, M-I-N-C-O-M-E, Mincome and Dauphin, Manitoba. Decades ago, like I said, I can't remember the exact date, but decades ago, Dauphin instituted, for I believe it was 5 years, minimum income, which is basically basic income, program. The money went to the lower class residents of the town, and they eliminated poverty. Now, this was an experiment. That's why it had the 5-year mark. They wanted data. They wanted to see how it translated. And wouldn't you know it, all the data got buried. Because basic income is not in the interests of the industrialists. It's not in the interests, really, of the government. Because in their mind, as long as everyone is struggling to keep their job, struggling to pay their bills, they're too busy with that to pay attention to whatever crooked games might be going on. Now, that's not saying that all the politicians are running crooked games, but enough of them are that they definitely don't want to see this happen. And the corporations definitely don't want to see it, because what that means is people's time can be valued higher. People's time can be valued higher in terms of wages, because they'll have the luxury of picking and choosing. It means jobs have to get better. The ones that we still need people to do. They have to get better. People have to be treated better. Under basic income. So we need to push for this, because right now we have a system that locks people into poverty. It locks them into a lifetime of wasted potential. And unless someone is very self-aware, and unless someone takes it upon themselves to educate themselves, all of these things, dependent on many factors involving, the education level of the parents, the role models these people encounter. But you can clearly see that within a poverty-stricken community, ignorance is going to reign supreme. It just is, because people are too busy worrying about where their next meal is going to come from to educate themselves. That's not a priority in that situation. Priority is go to work. Priority is get food. Priority is make money, make ends meet. Don't lose your house. That's a priority, not get smarter, not acquire information. We can only get into the state where our curiosity and our intelligence and our imagination can flourish when our brain isn't busy spinning itself in circles, thinking about all the drudgery of life. Stress makes it hard to think. You've probably noticed that in the past. You're stressed out and you're just like, I just can't hear myself think. I just can't. I have a fog in my head, Depression does it too, and depression and anxiety, two sides of the same coin. You can't think when you're in that state of mind. That's why mental health is through the roof right now, because so many people are in constant states of stress that they cannot organize their lives. They can't manage. They're overwhelmed. So to bring that down, to bring the stress levels down, the depression levels down, to make life feel worth living, to give people a sense of meaning, basic income is absolutely crucial. I am absolutely certain of this. The last thing I'll say is the common objection to anything like this, anything that to certain people smacks of socialism, and that's it. Well, if you just give people all this money, they're just going to lie around at home. They're just going to be lazy. They won't produce. They won't be productive members of society. That is an absolute load of crap. People like to think this way because it makes them see themselves as being hard workers and therefore good people. Anyone who's not a hard worker is not a good person. They're lazy, they're a bum, they're a loser, they're a leech, they're a pariah. It's an old way of thinking. It was put in people's heads by rich people who never had to work a day in their life. People who inherited their money through centuries of family wealth. I worked hard to get where I am. I deserve what I've got. And most of them really believe it. Most of them, it's not a lie. They believe that they worked hard. Most people believe they work hard. But it's not true. I don't know anyone in this world that doesn't want to have a sense of purpose or meaning in their life. Never met such a person. Now, the meaning's different for everyone. Maybe for someone it's hiking. Maybe that's the meaning of life to them. Maybe it's raising their kids. Maybe that's the meaning of life to them. Maybe it's painting. Maybe it's making music. Maybe it's scientific research. Maybe it's saving people, being a firefighter, being a policeman, being a medic. But I've never met anyone who dreams of spending their entire life lying on the couch watching TV. And the people who do dream of that find ways to do it anyways. They find ways to leech off the system. It's just what happens. But by and large, people struggle because they want to accomplish something with their life. They want it to feel like it was worthwhile at the end. People feel connected to one another, and the more they feel connected to one another, the more they tap into that collective consciousness, that sense of community, of brotherhood and sisterhood with one another, the more they want to do. People get up on Sunday mornings and they go up and they clean up their community. Now that's not the poor people doing that, you notice. That's the middle class, middle and upper middle class. Why? Because they have the freedom to do so. They are not worried about where their next meal is coming from, so they don't have to get up on Sunday morning and go to a crappy job. They can get up and they can contribute. They can do something good for their community, and they can feel good about it. That behavior would become the norm under basic income. I have no doubt. I think that that is true human nature. When you're given the freedom to help, you will, because it makes you feel good. It makes everyone's life better. Yours, your neighbors, your friends, your family. The more good you do, the more good is in the world. And the more freedom you have, the more freedom from scarcity, the more good you can do. The more you have to give back. And I'll say one last thing on this. And that's that if we give each other, and that's what we're doing, we're giving each other money, we're giving each other resources and help through basic income, because it would be government administered, and government is us. If we do that, if we collectively decide that we want what's best for each other, we'll all win. Because money doesn't go into people's pockets and stay there. It especially doesn't go into poor people's pockets and stay there. It gets spent because there are things that you need. And that money goes back into your community, and it goes around, especially if we're careful with how we use it. If we don't give it to the big corporations, if we give it to the small businesses, your local grocery store, not the big chain. You buy from small shops online, not big corporate online websites. So let's push for basic income. Let's free up human potential. Let's see what humanity can really do when we're unshackled. It's a radical shift from the individual responsibility, you're on your own mentality. And that is precisely what we need. We need collective consciousness. We need collective action. We need community unification. Because together we're more powerful. That'll be the Radical Podcast for today. I'm Ryan McKenna, bringing you radical ideas with the intention to create a radical shift in our future. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon.